do, I'm going to introduce our guest for today, Morgan, Steve Thomasson, if I pronounced that right, also known as The Gun Show. Hi, Steve.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me on.
No, absolutely.
No, thanks for coming. We're super pumped to get to know all about your Norwich fandom, because you don't sound like you're from around these here parts.
I'm not very far. I'm not very close at all, actually. I grew up in Bolton, so it was nearer the Manchesters. So for us, City was actually the oil-fueled nutters 10 miles down the road. So Norwich wasn't a typical club to gravitate towards, but I ended up being a Canary anyway. So the comedy on that was my parents weren't football fans at all, and they kind of discovered, oh, wait, we've got a son that loves the sport. And there is actually a picture of me from when I was 4 or 5 or something, and before I'd developed any semblance of choice, that I had, this is the kind of thing that luckily it's not too bad. It was one of the old Liverpool shirts with the Crown Paints logo at the front.
Yeah, I know the one, yeah.
And there is actually a picture of me somewhere wearing that. But I kind of dropped round all the local teams. My dad did take me to a Bolton Bury game when I was about 7 or 8 at Gig Lane, and I watched it. And I enjoyed watching it, but I didn't feel taken by the teams, if that makes any sense. I just kind of enjoyed the spectacle, and I thought, do I have to follow them for localities reasons? And this is absolutely true. You're going to be amazed at this. The reason it ended up being Norwich was because I had my first pet, which only lasted 4 weeks. We don't know why it died so quickly, but my first pet was a pet canary.
What were you feeding it?
Well, we were feeding it all kinds of seeds. I think we might have overfed it, actually, or it might have kept going, because we fed it all the grains and all the seeds we were told to feed it, but it only survived 5 weeks.
Right.
And in remembrance of my first pet canary, Norwich City became my team as the nickname as the Canaries.
I think that's the best reason to have supported a football club I've probably ever heard, Jez. I don't know about you, but in terms of Norwich, this is a killer. This is an absolute killer.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly Norwich. I can't think I've heard of any better.
Yeah, because Steve, Bolton's Lancaster, isn't it?
Well, Bolton's technically it's Greater Manchester, but to be honest, even though it was 1973 when Bolton was put into Greater Manchester, it still hasn't really caught on in the hearts and minds of people here. Even though I was born in 1980, I always write Bolton, Lancashire.
Yeah. Because your accent, if you don't mind me saying, is pretty thick.
No, I've always said
that. I did not expect you to sound like this whatsoever, Steve, I have to admit.
You didn't even catch that bit on the thread that we put in our other matches until I actually copied you in on it.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, should we jump into the questions then, Jez?
Yeah, let's do it. So do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you like going first.
I do. So, Steve, supporting Norwich from afar comes with its own challenges. How did you first, I suppose we've already asked this one question, really, but how did you first become a fan and what keeps you connected to the club?
We've already kind of covered the first bit, to be fair, because it was all about the pet canary.
Oh.
But in terms of keeping involved, to be fair, it's one of those things where it has become easier with the internet over the years, because in the early days, when I was like 9 or 10, you were forever trying to chase things on CFAX or grab the papers where you could.
Wow. That takes
I'm not old.
Huh? Yeah.
So nowadays, it is a lot easier. As long as you have internet access, you can keep track of things quite well. And the thing, to be fair, what stood out with Norwich over the last 20 or 30 years is that it's rarely been that dull.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean, we've either been in a playoff chase, we've either been fighting relegation, or we've been scrambling to get up. We've rarely had too many seasons. I mean, obviously, Daniel Farke's first season with us springs instantly to mind, where we pretty much started off in mid-table mediocrity, and despite the odd flutter here and there, rarely threatened to leave it. But for the most part, we've generally felt like we've had something on the line
great.
for a fair chunk of a season. I mean, even the season where we got relegated from the Premier League after my namesake Brian Gunn's injury and Andy Marshall went in goal, there was still the odd spell you thought, are we going to get away from it? Oh, shit, we're in deeper than we thought.
Yeah.
And then ultimately the trapdoor, we'd ended up dancing on the trapdoor and then falling through. Mm-hmm. But there's generally been something there. And I don't think fans of many other clubs can say they've had so many seasons with something at stake that we have. If you compare to other teams in the Championship right now, so compared to like Sheffield Wednesday, apart from their relegation down to League One and back up, compared to Coventry, compared to the obvious one for stability in the Championship is Preston North End. I don't think they've moved for 15 years.
No. And I think it's interesting you mentioned the time of Brian Gunn's injury and obviously Andy Marshall coming in, because that was the first time I really started. I mean, I was born in '86, so
yeah, so you're 6 years younger than me.
Correct. And I think I sort of tend to remember that sort of first season. My first season, well, obviously I'd seen him a few years previous against Wimbledon, but the first one I really remember was that sort of run into relegation into the Championship. Well, what was Division 1 at the time.
Yeah.
And I think there was that sort of spell in the wilderness, I suppose you call it, where we had the likes of Bruce Rioch and Brian Hamilton and Gary Megson's third or fourth coming.
And Walker came back for the second goal as well, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that's right. And, I sometimes look back on those days with fondness, but I think a lot of that's because of because it was my first sort of formative years of following the club. But you're right, from sort of Nigel Worthington getting us promoted to the Premier League, and even probably a couple of seasons before that when we were at the playoffs in Cardiff. I think, what was that, 2002? We've had probably 23 years where, bar the odd one or two seasons, we've kind of had something riding on every season.
Yeah. I think the last few, maybe this season, I guess most recently, like Steve said, Daniel Farke's 17-18. This season feels like it's going to be a bit of a damp squib. And when Dean Smith was with us in the Championship, and David Wagner sort of came in halfway through, I think they're the most mediocre seasons I've known in quite a long time. So, it's sort of. I think I'm going to say this. I think when fans say, well, it's been, enjoy the roller coaster ride, it's like, actually, you're right. It has been a roller coaster ride. And yet here we are, still fans of this crazy up and down club.
And we're still dreaming. Yeah. I would actually argue the fact that we've had the experiences we have, we can probably dream that bit more readily because we've kind of already been there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And it makes it all the more interesting given the changing in the infrastructure and the owner recently. I think that gives us, it gives us a little bit more hope. I don't think that I don't think you can say that, the past few seasons we've sort of brought players in that we couldn't spend. I know people argue on the pink and that spending 8 million in Championship isn't that much, blah, blah, blah. But last few seasons, we haven't even been able to do that. So, So, that, like you said, there is that element of keep on dreaming. And, hopefully we can, and we will.
Definitely.
I think the other thing as well that strikes me here is there are people saying, and to be fair, I've said it on the forum a few times, there's a lot of parallels for me between this opening season here under Torup, relative to Farke. It doesn't mean the second season that it's going to be Operation Piss the League.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, if we know as fans, what we should have learned as fans from Farke's spell with us is that if you're going to really gel a team together, it takes at least 2 pre-seasons and maybe 2 or 3 transfer windows to get something quite close to gelling in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a good point that you make, because 18-19, I think, was an anomaly. I'm not saying we got lucky, but I think it was an anomaly. The season that we went up again from the Championship, when we were a lot more like frugal with goals at the back compared to the ones we scored. I think that is what you're saying there. I think that was the pivotal team that took however many pre-seasons and however many, that one relegation to kind of get pure Farke ball with Norwich, I think.
And you could argue it came too soon as well. I think.
Yeah.
It did.
I think the team.
It did come a bit too soon for that set of youngsters.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at the likes of Cantwell, Lewis.
Aarons, yeah.
People like that. I think they were in their probably late. Well, yeah, still in their late teens. And I think they were then plunged into the Premier League, and some of those players sank quite rapidly. Some of them did okay, really, but I think it just wasn't the right. I think if they had a couple more years' experience under their belt, they might have made some better decisions career-wise, shall we say?
Yeah, another season or two's seasoning, and probably an experienced signing or two in the middle of the park.
Yeah,
they'd have had a tidy team out of that, but it just came a bit quick, and it sometimes happens.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
So moving on to question 2. So for those listeners who don't know Steve, aka Gun Show from Pinkin, Steve, you're a bit of a flying. Well, you're a man who's experienced in like continental football culture across Europe. So
I've been in several countries in terms of watching football, but I'm not a huge one in that regard. I've just been in some strange places to watch games.
That's the stuff we love on this pod. So can you sort of tell us, how does the match day experience elsewhere compare to Carrow Road? And can you tell us a couple of stories about those weird places that you've been?
It's difficult to compare in terms of fan experience with Carrow Road, because for obvious reasons, I've been following from so far away. I've not actually made it to Carrow Road yet.
Right. Okay.
So we need to put that caveat in.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our mission, to get you there.
Yeah, that's the intent. We're gonna get you.
Wait, Miss TGS to join me on the Norfolk Broads or something, but we'll see what happens after the Spreewald. So, but going back to the question in hand, I would probably say, and I think this is particularly clear with Jena, where I live now, Eastern German authorities, when you had Eastern Germany, tended to meddle a lot more in how clubs were named, how they were formed, and indeed which players played for which clubs. And although Carl Zeiss Jena, which is my local team now, as the name indicates, they're a corporate team like VW Wolfsburg, so for Volkswagen, like Bayer Leverkusen for the biochemical company, and RB Leipzig for Red Bull.
Yeah.
Carl Zeiss is obviously the manufacturer of optical lenses. They've been world famous.
Carl Zeiss, yeah.
And even though the club started as that name, particularly during the time as the old East Germany, there were several changes to the name. So like Motor Jena, Tractor Jena, there are a couple of others I can't remember. And one of the nice little touches that they have at Jena's ground when you go to watch a game there is they have all the old emblems of all the old incarnations of the club from when it was started in 1903 right to the present day. So you have the old badge of Tractor Jena, of Motor Jena, and a couple of the others. Have people, I think they're in the kits as well, wonking onto the pitch with all the flags. And for me, this tells something. This is who we were. This is where we've come from, and this is who we are.
Yeah.
Obviously, with Norwich, we've not had quite the same turbulent history. I mean, the club colours were a bit different. I think, if I remember rightly, I remember reading somewhere that the initial colours were blue and white, but it weren't too long before they changed to the Canary colours that we know today of yellow and green.
Yeah, that's right.
And what I'd like to see at Carrow Road would be something, if we can't do it with team names and such, we can certainly do it with old badges.
Yeah, we had a conversation on recent pod about the change of badge from the one that was from the 1970s to the current one.
Yeah.
I don't know how many badge changes there. I know that the one that was prior to the one that we all know and love from the 1970s was just a canary on a.
It was just a very plain canary on a ball. There was definitely. I think there may even been of one where there were just the 4 letters NCFC, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
I don't know that far back, but if that's the case, because obviously Norwich for younger listeners were called the Citizens.
Exactly.
So when they first started out and they played on Newmarket Road before changing the strip to yellow and green. owing to the fashionable Canary at the time. And I think the chair, one of the chairman or the director, was keen on Canaries, and so therefore decided to go down that route. And obviously we didn't look back. And then we moved to the Nest, but I think that was in the 1950 between 1910 and 20. I can't remember the exact.
I remember thinking it was about 1920, but I could definitely be wrong on this.
Yeah,
Carrow had its most recent 75th year anniversary, which was, I think, when we had the half and half yellow and green kit. So that'll give you an indication as to how long we've been at Carrow Road. And then,
is that that kit? Is that the yellow and green half and half and black shorts?
No, we never had black shorts. It was green shorts. It was
that the one with Aviva as the sponsors?
Yeah, where Aviva sort of cuts into the green bit, so it doesn't really.
No, the original version of that, which is what they aped, had black shorts.
Oh, quite possibly, yeah.
Possibly, yeah.
Very odd.
In an FA Cup game against Charlton, which was potentially I don't think it was the 100-year celebration, because it was during the time we got relegated. So I think that had to do with the coincidence with the Cup run, 50-year anniversary of the Cup run, where we reached the semi-finals. But in terms of logos, I think we've had 4. We've had in fact, it may only just be the 3. So we'd said that the original Canary was on a branch, not a football.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the second one was the one we know that was designed by, I can't remember the guy's name, Steve someone.
Richard Atkinson.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, in the 70s, and then with the most recent ones, just a touch up of that. The
other thing you could also do there, just to lend it that local colour, it would be the coat of arms of Norwich anyway.
Yeah.
You could put that in, and even if you felt you need to have another flag, put one in and put the one for Norfolk in on top.
Yeah, because there's obviously the lion and the castle, the city coat of arms, and the Norfolk is obviously I think it's just a lion. I don't think there's a castle on it. But yeah, I'd be interested to see what they had on the kit before the old Canary on the branch. Like you said, Steve, was it just NCFC, or was it actually just nothing?
I don't think there was anything. And I think there was an NCFC on a goalkeeper shirt, because I seem to remember photos of Kevin Keelan wearing it. But I don't think we ever had the NCFC. I know some people will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we ever had the NCFC as a logo on the shirt.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting to see. There isn't anything, Jez. There isn't anything at Carrow Road as like what Steve's talking about. Is there I guess an element of sort of a history wall, if you will?
There is in some of the what do you call it, the concourse where people go and buy drinks and stuff. So they have got news articles and old programs and stuff up, but nothing that sort of, as Steve, was a good idea. Nothing that kind of gives a real, but not that I've seen. There may well be, but not that is prominent. But like on the outside of one of the stands would be quite good, where they've got some. I think we had Andrew Omabaladelli on one of those big old boards. Maybe one of those. Do you know?
Yeah.
You cut out there, Jez, but yeah, I do know what you mean.
Yeah. Good. I suppose might be time to move on to question 3. Which European club's fan culture feels the most similar to Norwich City, and why? I'm going to answer this as well, but I'll let you go first.
If you'd have asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have said St. Pauli.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I would have said it because it's a club that's very organically in with its surroundings. When you consider its efforts with, say, Proud Canaries, and local more marginalised groups, Norwich has always struck me as a club that's tried to do quite a lot in terms of doing good by them, even though there's been the odd occasion. I vaguely remember one from Stuart Webber where he put his foot in it, where I think he got one wrong. I can't begin to remember the details.
Yeah.
And they said, no, I don't think that was quite right. And also the fact that we were all, and to some extent, Norwich were the last romantics in terms of trying to keep everything reasonably financed.
I love that. I love the way you've said that. That's so spot on. Brilliant.
And if you'd have said 3 years ago, I would have said St. Pauli. But the more I think about it, the more I think it falls to pieces. The first reason I say that is because St. Pauli is the junior club in Hamburg. It's not a club in a region where, unlike Norwich City, there's one big club and then there's 40 miles of bugger all.
Yeah.
And St. Pauli gets that appeal by the fact that it's the small, rebellious younger brother.
Yeah.
With Hamburg, the big, conventional, traditionally more successful club, literally 3 miles away. And it falls apart for that reason. And for this reason, I would actually say we need a club that is dominant in its own area, whose major rivals are some way apart, that's often tended to look a little bit inward or internationally due to its geographical location. And I would say SC Freiburg. For those who don't realise, SC Freiburg, so in Germany, the town is called Freiburg im Breisgau. It's in the far southwest of Germany, and some people may realise that Basel Airport actually serves the French city of Mulhouse, Freiburg, which is about 50 miles north, and Basel, which is just the other side of the border, because the airport itself is actually just in France. But the nearest rival in terms of football usually tends to be VfB Stuttgart, which is a good 100 miles away.
Wow.
And it's a part of the country where they've always seen themselves a little bit apart
from the rest.
Yeah. And there was a wonderful article in the Along Come Norwich website, and it was going on about Tim Closer, how he settled over from Wolfsburg, and how he was loving life in Norfolk with the horsey seals, amongst many other things that they'd mentioned on his Instagram by stalking it.
Yeah.
And they said Norwich has had this tradition of attracting and getting players to settle who've always felt a little bit out of place elsewhere. And Freiburg's kind of had a similar trend in German football.
Right.
And you throw in the distance of a nearest rival, namely Stuttgart. Our nearest rival is obviously the Old Farm Derby.
Yep.
I think that fits closer than St. Pauli does.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. I mean, for me, I know it kind of goes against your theory of obviously having no clubs around it, because it's got a lot of clubs, but I've been to Dortmund a few times, and I mean, they play in yellow. Yeah. Their opposition, or should I say their rival, Schalke, play in blue.
Yeah.
And they're a very friendly fan base, welcome you, and I think that suits us as well. I've actually brought some Borussia Dortmund lads over to watch Norwich.
Nice.
And they absolutely loved it. Said it was not the atmosphere. They said the atmosphere was a lot quieter. I mean, if you've ever been,
but to be fair, it's pretty difficult to compete with Dortmund.
It's one of the best I've if not the best I've ever been in. And you have to take an umbrella with you if they score, because otherwise you're getting showered in beer. But all part of the experience, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank God you weren't in Cottbus when they beat Bayern Munich, because I don't think that was beer that some of us showered us with.
This is a family podcast, Steve.
Wow. It is, but that was remarkable. Energy Cottbus got promoted to the Bundesliga for the first time for 2000, because that was my first year out in Germany, and everyone thought they were going to get tated. And they famously had the first time ever in Bundesliga history where they put a starting 11 out and there wasn't a German in it.
Right.
Because German players were so expensive for him, and Cottbus is in a really impoverished part of Germany.
Okay.
And they beat Bayern Munich 1-0.
Oh, wow.
But that was an experience.
A bit like when we beat Man City, I guess. No, I think like Jez, you're right. I think that sort of fan culture with Norwich is very much a case of it's friendly, but I think also culty in a certain way. Like Steve, you said about St. Pauli and the notion of what we were trying to do a few years ago. Like you rightly said, the Last Romantics, trying to do it the right way. But unfortunately, that's that we tried and it didn't quite pan out. But
it didn't quite stick.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I think what Jez says about the sort of like Dortmund always feels like a club that's got a very cult following as well. Even I appreciate it's a massive international club.
Yeah.
It just doesn't always feel that way to me. So I get what you're saying, Jez. So Steve, being the traveller of the world that you are, or of the continent you are, have you ever found yourself in a situation abroad where someone unexpectedly knew about Norwich City, or has gone up to you and gone, oh yeah, or you've seen someone wearing some memorabilia somewhere?
I think the best one I've had here was actually going to one of the local gyms here.
Right. Okay.
It wasn't about Norwich, though. It was about Daniel Farke.
Right.
Because basically there were quite a few gyms. I mean, Jena is a city of just over 100,000 people.
So just for listeners, where is that based in Germany, Steve?
Jena's in central East. It's in the old East Germany, in the central state called Thuringen in German. It's about an hour or so southwest of Leipzig, and it's fairly equidistant between Frankfurt and Berlin, but it's a fairly quiet part of the country around here.
Right.
But I was in Cleverfit, one of the local gyms here, and just signed myself in. Got chatting with the trainee behind the counter, and I think he came from Dortmund.
Okay.
And we ended up spending the next hour and a half speaking about Daniel Farke's career.
Okay.
And so he obviously knew a little bit about Norwich, but he didn't quite know how we had panned out under Farke's rule. And I was saying that, he bedded in the first season, and in his second season with us, it took 2 months to click, and then after that, it was just some of the most beautiful football we've ever seen in a very long time.
Yeah.
Because when it worked, it was so fluid to watch. And then we discussed that he knew about Farke's time at Lippstadt as well before it, and it was just remarkable that we ended up spending about an hour and a half after a workout just merrily chatting about Farke.
I mean, he had quite. I think what I really enjoyed is the first kind of like. Again, we talked about this on a previous podcast, but when Daniel first joined the club, obviously it was a bit stuttery. We sort of things didn't quite get there, but there was this like groundswell of intrigue around this foreign manager, because I think, Jez, am I right in saying that it was our first ever foreign manager?
It was.
Okay.
It was. I'm absolutely certain Farke was our first foreign manager.
Yeah, and it came with this different culture, and obviously having been at Dortmund too, it was, I guess, for us as being little old Norwich, I guess, a bit of a coup to have someone with that sort of pedigree. But I loved all the stuff.
He worked with Thomas Tuchel as well, albeit not that closely.
Yeah, and what I really enjoyed was those videos of him. What do you remember? Do you know the side that he left, and he was being led around the stadium on a horse?
That was Lippstadt.
Oh, exactly. Yes. And I loved that. I loved those little because at first my friend found them on YouTube, and he was like, "Have you seen these?" And I was like, "No." And it was kind of like before it got like a big thing, and then we obviously sang the song "Farke's on a Horse." Yeah. But I was like, why are they doing that? So Steve, what was the story behind that horse?
It was. I'm fairly sure it was when he was leaving the club, because I think this is. I'm going to disclaimer this next bit because I could be wrong. I just remember reading about it some time ago in The Athletic, because it was actually an interview with one of his closest friends from Lippstadt, because they were apparently completely on their uppers when he took over.
Right.
But he happened to be a former striker there, and it's from I think technically he was born in southern Germany, but moved to there as a youngster or something, and just basically grew up around there. And he took over everything and apparently wanted to be a director of football. And
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And then, but he ended up managing the team and decided, right, I'm going to focus on youngsters out of the region. And he actually got them punching well above their weight. But the plan was, I think, to take a year sabbatical or so because he'd done that much work in getting them restarted and reset. And then the offer from Dortmund came along and he thought, okay, right, I'll take that. That might not come around again. So he took it. So that was their way. I think that was their way of saying goodbye to him.
Right. Bit of an odd way of saying goodbye. When I got made redundant over a year ago. I didn't get carted around the office on a horse, which it's kind of regrettable. But no, I just think it's really fascinating. I mean, those sort of like regional grounds, Steve, because I've unfortunately I've never been to any games in Germany, even though I'd love to. Are they quite big stadiums, or do they, I guess for comparison's sake, Dulwich Hamlet in southeast London, if you've ever been, but you have a main stand and then smaller stands. What do they kind of look like?
It varies a bit because don't forget the Germans' football pyramid is somewhat different. So if we go to Jena again, as an obvious place for me to start, they're in the regional leagues.
Right.
Now, you have Bundesliga, Zweite Bundesliga, so the second division, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then you have the Dritte Bundesliga, so Premier League, Championship, Division 1. But then after the Dritte Liga, you then have 5 regional leagues.
Right, okay.
So you have north, northeast, south, southwest, and south. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. Now, Jena are in the northeast division, and they got relegated there from the Dritte Bundesliga about 4 or 5 years ago. So they're basically one of the top dogs within this regional division.
Right, okay.
But they don't quite make it out. So think like Ipswich in League One for a bit, and you get the rough idea.
Right,
But the corresponding thing here is you do end up with a mixture of teams that were big clubs but have fallen somewhat.
Right.
And then quite a lot of plucky little village clubs that have scrapped and kicked and battled their way up. But you couldn't see them getting much higher up the German pyramid. I mean, if we take a couple of examples off the top of my head, if we take Nordost, so northeast, there's a small club near Leipzig called Eilenberg. Right. It's a small town. I mean, I don't think there's more than 12,000 people there. And they're usually one of the also-rans in this division, but they keep hanging on in.
Right.
But their stadium, I don't think it's even got a roof on it.
Right, okay.
If it's got a roof, it's at one end.
Right.
Jena's just had the stadium rebuilt.
Right, I see.
Jena's just had a complete rebuild. I think it holds about 14,000.
So it's a bit of a juxtaposition then.
Yes.
I guess it would be like Kings Lynn Town being in League One.
Or League Two, really.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a bit odd, but if it's entertaining, it's entertaining.
It certainly can be. I mean, if we pick another one, I mean, you get the other odd big club that fell down. Cottbus dropped into that division, but they got promoted last season. They actually won in the playoffs and got up to the Dritte Liga. But then Leipzig has a couple of other teams that are actually in the regional league in the same one. They've got Chemie Leipzig and Lokomotiv Leipzig.
Right.
Now, one of them plays at the Bruno Plasch Stadion, which was Leipzig's primary football ground until obviously the Red Bull Arena got built, although it wasn't given that name. It had a different name because it was built for World Cup 2006. Okay. And that's an old stadium. I mean, that was Leipzig football in a nutshell. And that's about 14,000, I think. But I think they might have lost capacity because some bits are a bit unsafe nowadays. But I might be wrong on this one. That might have been renovated without me knowing.
Okay. So just... I mean, obviously, Jez, do you want to ask the next question? If you're there. If not, I can. So football forums and the Pinkin community. So for those who are uninitiated with you, Steve, you are known as the Gun Show, you're not?
I am the Gun Show, yes.
You are the Gun Show. And how long have you been sort of posting?
I think it was July 20 when I started.
Right. So you're quite a prolific. Part of the Pinkin community, I would say. And the next few questions are sort of, I think, talk about online forums, their sort of continued place in football culture, and obviously focusing on Norwich. We have quite a the Pinkin is pretty famous. It was sort of for younger listeners, it was part of a newspaper, the EDP, I believe, and it was a sports section that had been sort of running from quite a lot, many decades ago.
For many years, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and it was pink, hence the Pinkin. Yeah. Genius. But
logical.
So yeah, so we have an online forum called the Pinkin. For those who haven't discovered it, I'm sure it's pretty famous. But yeah, so I guess, how did you first get involved with the Pinkin community, and what makes it stand out from other fan forums that you've come across?
I used to do quite a bit of chatting on the Facebook page.
Okay.
And I gradually got annoyed at the relative lack of moderation going on, because you generally end up with rather too many posts saying, get your bookie tips from Robin Shyster. Follow Robbie Shyster on Telegram. Oh,
right.
And I thought, the other classic one being, I like what you've got to say. Could I send you a friend request?
Right. Okay.
And I thought, for heaven's sake! I think I actually got banned on Facebook a couple of times from saying a couple of slightly too brutal home truths towards them. And in the end, I thought, sue it. So I thought, well, I'm quite enjoying the chat when there was actually some decent chat to be had. So I just decided to Google Norwich City fan forums and found the Pinkin first, and thought, this looks quite good. It looks relatively active, and there's always some interesting stuff to read, if I don't always agree. So I logged on, joined in, and been here ever since.
Yeah. I mean, have you accessed any other fan forums, or not really?
I did wander onto Norwich Talk a little when we had the incredibly long Christmas cut-off.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I know.
I had a quick look at it. It wasn't as active, and it got a little livelier because a few more wandered on, but it never got that big. And as soon as the Pinkin came back, I thought, thank heavens for that. Although it did take its time, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what sort of happened. I know it had. I was back. Well, me and Jez were banned on the Pinkin a few weeks ago for basically 10 days. I was in a loop, so I could view comments, but I couldn't actually do anything else, and I couldn't sign out.
Yeah, I was in the same position. It wasn't really a ban, but I know what you mean. You know, things like the emoticons were suddenly 300 times the usual size, and it was almost like it disintegrated to the very basics of an acorn electron or something. You just couldn't make sense of anything.
Yeah.
And the input box was grey, and you'd click it and you couldn't type anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been going for a lot longer than I've been active on it. I mean, I can't remember when I signed up. I think I used to use the EDP for comments, and then they changed the format, and then it's sort of just, you can't, it sort of forced me to kind of log on to the Pinkin, and it is a weird and wacky and wonderful world for those uninitiated. But please do get involved if you don't, if you haven't used it before. But I think it's a great forum, and I think it's got some really great characters. I wouldn't be sat here now talking to you if I hadn't.
We wouldn't even be talking to each other without it.
Yeah, and this podcast came about, sort of evolved from Jez putting an advert out on the Pinkin, asking if anyone wants to kind of get involved, and I did, and the rest is kind of history, I guess. But I think I have been on other fan forums for other clubs. I think ours is probably one of the. I think it's quite clear how to kind of post. It's it's not without its old school charm, and it does the job, I suppose, and
it does the job quite well when it's fully functional.
Yes, when it's fully functional, but I think there's an awful lot of. I think people were quite upset over Christmas that they were going to lose access, and we were going to lose so much information, and I got that too. I got a bit sad because I was like, well, it does feel like there's been so much fun stuff, and posters come and go, and there's a lot of history on that Pinkin. So
I
long.
think the thing that's best in many ways when you think about it is it's a wonderful history, not so much of the club itself,
Yes,
but of how fans were feeling.
Yeah,
at that point in time, how they generally responded to the changes in strategy that we were following, to the changes in fortunes we were exposed to, and it would be a shame to lose it just for that alone.
Yeah, I mean, go on, Jez.
No, sorry, I think I cut off for some time there, but I think there's some really funny and poignant moments on that forum as well. So, I mean, the best example I could give is the Mr. Chops Christmas production. I mean,
that was brilliant.
Yeah, and Mr. Chops unfortunately doesn't post anymore for whatever reason, but I think you're right, Steve. It was absolutely superbly written, and I think the point you made about how we feel as fans at the time, it was there was people starring in it like Roger Mumby and his sort of what's the word I'm looking for, like reputation, I suppose, of being that sort of really nice guy that would always speak to the fans, and Mr. Chops had very cleverly written that into it, and little things like
the Beaver came through.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well as that is this. So I've just seen a squirrel fall out of a tree. That was hilarious.
It wasn't chasing Captain Fisher, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And I'd be surprised if it was the same one. But he literally fell from about 20 foot. It's brilliant. I shouldn't say that really. That sounds like animal cruelty, doesn't it? But he landed on his feet.
He was designed to do that, to be fair, Jez.
But yeah, so what was it? And also some really poignant stuff as well. So like what the raise funds things that they do on there, and
CSF stuff.
Yeah, I just think without that platform, they probably would find another platform to do it, but I don't think it'd have the same impact.
I think you might be right on that one, because it also takes quite a bit of time to re-establish something like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are a few other ones that sort of kicked around as sort of they're quite new, and I've used one, and it sort of doesn't feel quite as easy to get on with. I know, again, it's got its user interface quirks, we'll say, but but it's it does what it needs to do.
I think I was always
people that make a forum at the end of the day.
No, exactly. I think I was always the club used to have an official one on the canaries.co.uk website,
right?
And we're going back probably a good. Oh wow! I mean, I was teenagers, so probably the best part of 20 years, maybe more than that, 25 years. And someone called Joe Ferrari, who used to work at the club, he was in sort of the media relations department, I think. No longer works for the club, unfortunately. Such a great guy, but he used to moderate that and come on, and we used to do like regular meetups. So anyone that posted on there, so I believe that some of the posters, I hope they don't mind me mentioning them, that are on the Pinkin these days. The likes of Till 2020 was on the official forum, I believe. Right. But there was one or two others as well who sort of, when the official one closed down, the reasons that they gave for it closing down is because they said that because social media had come to the forefront, they didn't feel that there was any need to have a forum anymore. But I disagree with that somewhat, because I think sometimes, and we're going to come on to it in a later question, but I think things can get missed on social media very quickly. Like you can put a quote on there, and if there's like 300 comments, you've made a really good comment, you're not going to see it.
Yeah, that was initially my first thought. The advantage that the club would have there is that they can control the narrative a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that sort of bleeds into that next question anyway, talking about, do traditional football forums still have a place? I mean, you just sort of highlighted that. I think the source of like where you can raise, the whole raise funds, the CSF thing, the Norwich City Social Club quiz things, it all promotes a sense of belonging. Okay, obviously it's talking about football, but it gets people out and about, and I think in this day and age, and I've experienced in the past, quite a lot of loneliness. Then these sort of options are out there to help people alleviate that. And social media is what it is. There's no getting away with it from it. We are where we are with it, but it can be a bog. It can be a bog of negativity sometimes.
Social media is a double-edged sword in that regard.
Yes,
because it can often be a little bit soul-crushing, or at least you see examples of stupidity or just personal weakness where you just think, did we really have to go there?
Yeah.
But you can also find people with which you get on splendidly well. There's actually the irony that Miss TGS and myself, we actually met in a Facebook group.
All right, okay.
We actually met in a Facebook group for the Child Free.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Brilliant.
So what you said there about the need for communication and the need for some sense of belonging, there will always be a need for that, particularly when talking fans of a club. But I do think the use of a forum may change a little bit, because Jez made that point about Joe Ferrari, and I'm actually a little surprised, although we have seen it a little bit more with Connor coming on the website a little bit more, particularly when we had the technical difficulties. Mm-hmm. I actually wonder if the club might not have, I wouldn't expect them to put Ben Knapper on, but someone within the club to say, oh, and by the way, this, and this, and just to inform fans a little bit more. So to actually use it as a form of information alongside the other communication channels that they've got, such as the Pink and the EDP, the website, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout, to be fair. I mean, there's nothing stopping the club doing that, and it would certainly help with fan engagement.
That's the obvious link.
Yeah,
I would say that's the obvious link, particularly when you had the old stories before about getting the flags and the displays going that we had going for quite nicely for a bit under the Webber Farker years, and it seems to have just disappeared a little bit in the last couple, unfortunately.
Yeah, we sort of covered that. We covered that on a previous pod. I mean, there's something in the pipeline that they might well be back. I think that they were a bit hesitant to bring them out because of the last few seasons and how things are sort of swayed. But we'll see what happens with the groundswell of under Hoff, because it's still early days. There's still a lot of work. There's still a lot of work to go. I think we've sort of covered question 7, Jez, about the discussion on forums compared to the nature of Instagram and so on.
Yeah, maybe we should move on to the next one.
Okay. Do you want me to ask it?
I'll go for it. If you could bring one, because then it will lead into you doing the random question. Then when we reach the last question, if you could bring one additional element from another European club to Norwich City, Steve, what would it be?
I kind of mentioned that earlier on, actually, or I mentioned one, namely from Jena, about bringing all the previous club emblems, etc. I think that would be a nice way of saying this is who we are.
Yeah.
But another one, which I thought was brilliant, it was in Estonia. I was in Tallinn for the half marathon there in 2018.
Right.
And it happened to be the 100th anniversary of Estonian independence. And anyway, the very same weekend, Estonia were playing Greece in the Nations League.
Okay.
The day before the half marathon. So I thought, I'll go and watch the game. It was only 20 minutes walk from the holiday apartment I'd rented. So wandered through South Tallinn and got to the Alakok Arena and bought an Estonia shirt, which I've still got, and took my place in the corner of the stadium. And to my amazement, I thought this was actually a brilliant little touch, because I've never seen it in any other ground that I've been in. And what they did, they put a little folding card on. It was probably about half an A4 in terms of width, but about A4 in terms of length. And they put several different chants on in Estonian.
Right.
So that if you heard a chant, but you probably couldn't quite tell what it was, you could pick it up and try and join in just to fire the team along. And if you go into a bigger stadium and you hear, say, On the Ball City, well, you might lose. But if you've not been before, I actually think it might be a pretty good idea to do something similar so they can all join in more or less straight away.
Yeah.
But the one thing that was particularly funny about that in Estonia was they actually put the Estonian national anthem on as well. So if you wanted to try and sing it when the anthems went up, they actually put the anthem on.
Brilliant. Yeah, I just think that was a raucous atmosphere there, wasn't it? Estonia, Greece.
Not really. The stadium was half full. It was about 8,000.
Right. Fair enough.
Greece won 1-0. It weren't. It was one of those games where the Greek goalkeeper looked shaky, and Estonia were resolute, but they were
toothless.
Yeah, it kind of reminded some of
sounds like someone else.
To be fair, it looked a bit like our performance against
Preston.
Yeah, it was similar. There's quite a lot of huff and puff, but
no end product. That's about right.
Very little.
I think famous footballers from Estonia. I'm pretty sure the only one I can think of, was Mark Poom. I think he was Estonian.
He was, but then you don't forget Ragnar Klavan at Liverpool.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course.
And you've also got there's a young keeper. I think he was at Arsenal called Karl-Henry Hine.
Yeah, remember him.
Because he's quite decent. There were a couple of others as well, and I can't remember the names. Unsurprisingly, there was one from Scotland. Or he was at Motherwell for a bit, called Henry Anir, who was rapid but not great.
That sounds like I can't pronounce his name. Plachetta. Yeah.
TGS bingo fans are probably going to love you for mentioning that.
I remember.
Plachetta, the old L, because it's actually got a slash across it in Polish. If I remember rightly, it's pronounced more like a W rather than an So it's not Plachetta, it's Plachetta, I think.
Okay.
Interesting.
So, what's been your most memorable moment as a Norwich supporter, despite following from a distance? I mean, you've got loads to choose from. We talked about that when we first opened the conversation. So,
it's very difficult. I mean, if we're going to have a personal one, there was one from about 30 years ago where we lost in I think it was an FA Cup tie to a lower league team. I think it was Brentford.
Right.
I was only about 14 or so at the time, and I wrote a letter to Robert Chase wondering what was going on. And he sent me a letter back calling me Mr. Thomasson. And an interesting article from the Times about club finance. I think it was during the days when Spencer Pryor was playing for us, but I do remember that quite clearly.
Yeah.
But if you go to the playing side of things, as you said, it's very difficult to narrow it down to one. I mean, Alex Neil winning the playoff final because we looked like we were struggling to get back into the mixer, and then Neil came in, and suddenly it was like a switch had been flipped.
Yeah,
it was one of the best new manager bounces I can remember.
It was superb, wasn't it?
Stormed. And another classic one, the second leg in the San Siro. We had half the team missing that day. I mean, Gary Nixon was pulled out for an unexpected joyride around the San Siro turf in his late 30s due to suspension. And in the first half, as Alan Hansen said on grandstand, there was one team there worth several millions of pounds at the time, and he said, it certainly weren't Inter Milan, because in the first half we just did everything but put one in.
Yeah.
And a Koku chipped Zenga, and it landed on the roof of a net, and we thought, it's going to make it just too much. Another one, we can't leave this question unanswered without Tim Closer's header.
Yeah. This came up. Yeah, this came up on another podcast. That it's always that image. I always see the image of him smacking the corner flag in my mind's eye when you said that.
The one I remember is James Maddison storming down the touchline towards the bench, because everyone else has gone in a massive pylon. And James Maddison went flying down the touchline. I think he went celebrating with Arca.
That was Brentford, wasn't it?
No, it was Ipswich to 1-1.
That was the 1-0. That was the equaliser when.
Of course it was. Yeah. Fair enough. Oh, good. So I suppose finally, then, if you could attend one Norwich match in the history, what would it be and why?
I think you just put me on the spot there about as much as Daryl Such's penalty miss. I have to make a bit of a confession at this point, because I suffer from what I jokingly call Fritz-Walter syndrome.
Right.
And Fritz-Walter, in case people don't know, he was a legendary former German international footballer of the 1950s.
Yeah.
And he was a one-club man. He played with Kaiserslautern, and he was captain of the German team that won the World Cup in 1954 under Sepp Herberger in his rule. And he had a reputation, particularly when he left the sport, when he stopped playing football. he was such a nervous spectator, he wouldn't watch the team live.
Right. Okay.
He'd go on the radio, he'd listen to the radio, and he'd say, "Please don't disturb, I just want to hear it on the radio," because he was so nervous watching the games.
Right.
It was difficult for him to cope with.
Right.
And I don't play Football Manager with Norwich for the same reason. I kind of think if this goes wrong, I kind of feel personally responsible. And
I love this.
Even on Football Manager.
yeah. And yet, if I had to pick one game, I would actually say the 3-2 win against Manchester City, because when you think about it, we all know on the Pink 'Un the week before that game, we all thought we are going to get absolutely roasted.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
This is a case of, if we lose 4-0, I'll be happy. We had 8 first teamers out. Michael McGovern was probably fancying a chance of a 20-minute cameo in midfield. We had that guy on loan from Seville, Amadou, who hadn't even played at who was envisaged for the Tetty position, and he ended up playing centre back with Godfrey, who was just making his way at centre half. And then we went 2-0 up.
Yeah.
And at that point, at 1-0 on a situation like that, particularly when it came quite early, when McLean headed in that corner about 20 minutes in, and it might even been sooner than that, you think, we just might have poked the bear here.
Yeah, that's what exactly, yeah.
This is going to get painful if they wake up. And there were signs in that early stage where you could see the door was creaking, but they were scrapping with everything they had. The ball had come in, a header just get there, or Tim Krul plucks it out the air. But you could see the team were hanging on, and then McLean got that header and the roof came off.
Yeah, I think we felt that the world over.
And then not too long after, we got the counter-attack to stick. You thought Pookie's going to slot this bottom right, but he did even better than that. Played Cantwell to tap it into an open net, and then the roof pretty much did come off.
Yeah.
And then at this point, there was a wonderful one by John Moxon. If you remember the one a few years ago where they had him doing the introduction to a kit, and he was going through Norwich's spell in Europe, and he said, this was about the bit where we played Bayern in the Olympiastadion München. And he said, when they got 2 up, and he said he used the phrase fantasy football, and he said you could see amongst the fans, they suddenly started to believe that Norwich just might get there. And at 2-0 at Man City, and they were shaken, and you could think, if we get to half-time at 2-0, we're really in this. But of course, along came Norwich. Aguero bagged just before half-time.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, Guardiola is going to give them the mother of all hairdryers, and they're going to come absolutely storming out after us. And then early in the second half, the 2 centre-halves, Otamendi and Stones, I think it might have been, came up with an absolute mother of a mix-up. Buendia poaches the ball, plays Pookie in, who has to take a touch, just about managed to slot it in, and suddenly it's 3-1.
Yeah.
We've gone through the mill at this point. We're there thinking, we're going to get absolutely pasted. It didn't look good at the start, but we hung on just about. And suddenly we're 3-1 up with 40 minutes to go.
Yeah.
And at that point, and to be fair, the Long Come Norwich website, the report for that was beautifully written, I have to say. I don't know who wrote it, but they summed it up beautifully. At that point, for the crowd, it's just about you just drive your team on. You know your role at that point. You just keep singing.
Yeah.
If the team are showing you the effort, you just keep singing. And they made a wonderful comparison, because there is a poignancy that when Delia had her Sherryfield moment, wondering where we all were, it was against Manchester City at home.
Yeah.
And in this game, as they said, the team were pushed over the line by a fervent crowd who appreciated their effort and saw them hanging on with everything they had for the shirt. And I said, I'm a horribly nervous spectator who would struggle. But if I was going to pick one game where I would go through the ringer, that would be it.
Brilliant.
But
I actually can't listen on the radio.
Mm.
I can't listen to I can't. It makes me more anxious listening to it on the radio than if I actually watch it in
It
in
does, because
person.
every single shot coming in, your thing's going top bins.
Yeah. And when you can visually see what's going on, it's either less panicking inducing for me. I can't deal with it on the radio. It drives me crazy.
This is actually why I tend to follow live feeds.
Okay. Yeah, but then you have that agonizing wait. So I can't do that either.
Yeah.
Because you're waiting for, like, there's that time that it takes for the update to come from whoever's commenting on it, and then you're like, and then all of a sudden it's a goal against Norwich or whatever, and you're like, I'm not going to swear, but you're like,
Blast and botheration.
Yes. Is it that time, Jez?
I dread to say yes. It is. It is that time of the week for the random question of the week. Over to you, Morgan Hewitt.
Okay. Look, you sort of spoiled it a bit there, Jez. It's my tune. So it goes random question of the week. Steve, never gets old. Steve, you're a runner, I believe. Okay.
I try to be.
My question to you is, if you had to go on a half marathon with any former Norwich player as your water boy, and then imagine he's carrying water bottles on his chest for you, so you can pass them to you and you can keep running whilst peeing and drinking, who would your water boy be and why?
What a question that is. To be fair, at half marathon, you just wait for the water stations. So, that's a great. The problem there is when you're running a half marathon relatively competitively, it's fairly difficult to do that much talking.
Right.
So you don't get to do the convo all that well. I mean, if I were to do that, I'd have to drop the pace about quarter of an hour.
They're not going to talk. They're not going to talk to you, Steve. They just want you to get over the finish line and beat your time. They're just there as a donkey, if you will.
Yeah, that changes my answer a bit. To be fair, because if we were talking about someone to talk with, then obviously I'm going to go with my namesake. I'm going to go with Brian Gunn on that one.
Okay.
If we're talking about the one to sort of drag me over the line.
It's got to be Three Lungs Holt, hasn't it?
Yep. He's a fairly good shout, but to be fair, most professional footballers will cross over reasonably well to half marathon. I mean, there was one where Darren Huckabee did one for a training run. He did something like 1 hour 24 on a training run. Now, I'm pretty fit by my age standards, but I do 140.
Right.
I do 140 to 145 when I'm fully fit. So, to be fair, you can take your pick of a lot of pro footballers at that point. I suppose if I was to pick one, I just want one that embodied the notion of just not giving in and punching above the weight. And I think the two obvious ones for me there would probably be Grant Holt or Ewan Roberts.
Yeah, I don't know if Grant Holt could get half a marathon now, could he?
Probably not, but if we're talking in their peak.
Yeah.
If we're talking in their peak, I might just chuck in one for the TGS bingo players here.
Go on then.
There's part of me saying, mainly because of that really hilarious rip down that he did of Jordan Hugill on one of the training camps, I wouldn't mind taking Lungi with me.
Yes.
Because if you remember, they ran that training camp in Bavaria, I think it was, and Ben Gibson was doing the camera shooting.
Yeah, I remember.
And they were in the vats of cold water. Now, I love that kind of cold water stuff. It's a case of you get used to the breathing. And after you got rid of the first 20 seconds, it's actually not that difficult. And Jordan Hugill was kind of just hanging on the edge of the barrel.
I remember that.
And Ben Gibbs was going, "You okay there, Gibbo?" And before he was there, Lungi was sat next to him, as chilled as you like, going, "He's soft, he's not a Viking." And I thought, yeah, I'm with you on that one, Lungi. I'm definitely with you on that one.
Definitely.
There were a few bits of ice in there, and they looked like they were half the Titanic floating in one of them, but it's not that bad. It's literally the shock of the first 20 seconds.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd rather have a nice warm bath with a duck and some foam.
It's not good after a long run.
Yeah.
You're better going lukewarm or cold. You do warm afterwards, but you need to go cold or lukewarm first.
Right.
Otherwise, you're more likely to get delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yeah. Lukewarm is like mine and Jez's relationship, isn't it, Jez?
Yourself. I'd say it was red hot, but there we go.
Yeah.
Absolutely no comment, ladies and gentlemen. And if anyone can see anyone's faces, don't adjust the contrast settings because they're not usually this red.
You've done this before, Steve.
Brilliant.
Once, actually.
So yeah, we that sort of wraps it up then, Jez.
Andy Hughes would be mine.
Okay.
Just for the pure encouragement, the clapping of what Hughes was famous for was him coming out and applauding everyone, and literally, I think that bloke could applaud himself in the mirror. To be honest. So
I've got to admit, as a distance runner, that kind of hacks me off a bit.
Oh really? Oh, fair enough. Probably not. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. If you ever saw me, Steve, you'd appreciate that I'm not a distance. I'm not a runner, full stop. Regardless of if there's distance related or not.
You're more of a sitter, aren't you, Jez?
I'm more of a swimmer. Yeah, I'm a
sitter.
bobber.
With that,
I said sitter.
I know what you said. I was trying to jazz it up.
But, jazz it up.
If you could ever imagine my football career, Steve, I'm more of a Dimitar Berbatov type.
So basically you've got probably the best first touches ever. Just look like you've played with a nonchalance that looks like whilst you're waiting for the ball to come down, you've probably just dashed off a verse of something Dostoevsky-esque and just trapped the ball.
Correct. Yeah. So, well, yeah, I think that's it then, Morgan. I think you've got a train to catch, haven't you? So,
I do.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's it's
thanks
been
for coming on
about your experiences.
Thank you very much for letting me join in. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to do so.
No worries, mate. It's been fantastic to chat to you and get to know the voice behind the poster, the Pinkin poster.
Not a problem. My pleasure.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone, and look forward to speaking to everyone soon. There we go. It's a wrap.
Cheers, Jez.
We can swear now.
Yes.
Really. I just would have to put a little E on it.
Jez, you didn't sign off for the usual. You can catch us on all the socials. And,
your missus does that. I don't know why I even say it, to be honest. Because she does all that, doesn't she?
Oh yeah, true. That's true. Okay. It's just a nice to sign off. I don't know. Anyway, great, Steve. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for the invitation.
No problem.
Excellent. It'll probably go out in about April, Steve. So we'll be in touch and let you know when it goes out. If you can just send.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Barkley. Thanks so much for listening. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review if you enjoyed the show. You can also catch all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you've got any questions, stories, or topics you'd like us to cover, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, on the ball, City.